I think it's important kind of when we start thinking about this, and Chef, you were talking about, understanding, and the word that I would use, and I use this often, and we all should, I think, it helps when we start thinking about considering changes, adaptations, and new innovation, is the word empathy. And so one of the things and your slide said this, and I think it was pretty nice, pretty well put, is that get to know your customer, right? Sit in the booth, as we like to say. I mean, it's a really important cue that we can all take. And I think it's particularly hard for those of us who've spent a long time in this industry to stand back and look for the aha and the new. Empathy is a word that I think we would use today. Before I get into that, just 3 macro trends that I really, really want to talk about, because I think they're a giant impact on our industry. I've had customers call us, my clients call and talk about this quite a bit. And so I think it helps kind of us framework before we get into this mindfulness. Let's talk about 3 of these things. First thing I'm going to talk about is to go and delivery. Right? If I've had a conversation with a QSR client, one I've had 4 in the last year, that talk about strategies on to go and deliver. Right? We're seeing a tremendous amount of change in the marketplace and the way the back of the house is thinking about how do we take these particular dishes or this section of the menu and make it travel, make it to go. How do we get it ready on time? What are all those infrastructure things that really, really can disrupt our lives? And the reason we're seeing that is because it's becoming a consumer expectation. All right, you guys heard of a company called Soothe? It's literally massage to go, right, on demand. So you can get an app, boom, some creeper shows up and rubs on you for about 30 minutes. And, look, that's not their tagline, but that's basically what happens. That's exactly what happens. They just raised $35 million in level C funding, all right? So you can get on-demand massage. Guess what? Their expectation is that Cheesecake Factory can get you a burger and fries in about 20 to 30 minutes. And when it shows up, and you might know this more than I do, those fries better not be soggy, right? That ketchup cannot have gone through my bun, right? And I gotta have the almost same experience. Cheesecake Factory has seen a 12% rise in total sales. Cheesecake Factory. I mean, you show up and they've got a phone book for a menu. Yeah. Right? You see, it's scary, it's intimidating to me. When you think about a company like that, that says we can tackle and make money and profit off it to go, it's something that we have to consider. Another client of ours is called Asynchrony Worldwide Technologies. They help Panera figure out their in-house infrastructure on to go. Right? You guys know, familiar with Panera, you've seen this. Well, not only did Panera go to them and say, look, here's what we want you to do. We want you to put kick-ass Wi-Fi in our system. And Worldwide or Asynchrony said, how about we work on the whole system, right? How about we give you this puck system you can take to your table. You can deliver food directly to the table. And while we're at it, why don't we update your app? And why don't we give you a big old nice screen? And so when people come in, they see my name, it says Andy, and where my order is and the process. And it's transformed their to-go business. It's made a huge, huge difference. Obviously, Domino's, one of those that has gone from really, we worked at Pizza Hut as well. And Pizza Hut was what, number one? Number one, right? Forever, right? And everybody said, what's Domino's got? Domino's has cardboard, right, with marinara sauce on it. And the Domino's went, okay, we're gonna fix that. But fundamentally what they really did, not just beyond food, and you gotta fix food. I mean, let's face it, right? That's a big deal. Was they got behind the scenes and worked on that infrastructure, right? And managed your expectations as a consumer. And now I'm watching some stupid little application build, and it says, Jerome's making my pizza, and it'll be here before I know it. That's building expectations and changing the experience for somebody. So to go, delivery, still on the radar, still something we have to figure out. And by the way, I think taking your whole menu and making it to go is often a futile gesture. And you said something, Chef, that I think is really, really important, is let's do a few things right? What are those areas and opportunities that we can make to go specifically where the translation wins all the way across? And I'm not talking about catering. If you're going to move into this venue, don't take the easy way out and say, hey, you know what, let's just make it a catering situation, because that's not the consumer expectation. Consumer is, I don't have to order food for 30 people. I can order food for myself, and it's more or less the same relationship. Let's talk about the rise of craft. I think this is sort of one of those probably the wrong crowd for me to talk about this. If there's anybody who knows about craft, one-off, especially little places, it's this group here. I think it's interesting to me when I start thinking about the rise of craft and it getting more normal, right? I mean, we've seen, CSD sales, carbonated soft drinks, decline, right, over the many years, actually. What have we seen tick up slightly? It's craft soda, right? Now, why is that? I think that actually plays into the part of this mindful consumer, and often it's, it's small batch, it's got an origin story, it certainly has less sugar for most, or at least from all. But I think it goes beyond that. We're seeing companies like Pernod Ricard. That's a liquor company, right? Mm-hmm. Is that it? Doesn't pronounce that? It's French. It's always butchered, right? You guys heard of Our Vodka? Our Vodka is really sort of an interesting cue. It actually has, I think, 4 flagships, which is, I don't know why 4 stores would be a flagship. I thought it was one of those. But there's one in Paris. There's one in New York. There's one in Detroit. And I think maybe in Las Vegas. And what they do is they make artisanal or small batch vodka from local water sources, which I thought was pretty ballsy, put one in Detroit. Yeah. just to be candid, I mean, I think they got a little lead in the water nearby. That's a massive liquor brand. I mean, they own Absolute and Smirnoff and a ton of wines. That's a massive brand that has started a small fire, and they are going to see where that goes. When we think about our companies and the breadth and the reach that a lot of us have, and then this consumer driver toward craft items or craft opportunities, I think it at least changes our mindset to say, what do we have that's nuanced that only we can own, that we can move or transfer over in a different way?
So a big name brand, so Carbon breweries in Houston, right? Great beers, right? They're owned by Budweiser, and they were funded secretly beneath the veil by Budweiser. But they built this kind of genre behind them that everybody believes are still small and craft, but they're not. Budweiser.
No, I think that's a mistake. I think that's a mistake to do. And I totally, by the way, AB's a client, and not to say anything on camera that we get against, but I will say this. I think it is it's not dishonest, but it's not transparent. And I think the consumer, this mindful consumer specifically, doesn't mind if you're a big giant brand who started a small fire somewhere else. Don't hide it, right?
It just feels disingenuous, which kind of counteracts the message that you're trying to put out to begin with.
I feel that way. I mean, that's why I give kudos to Pepsi on 1893. They're like, man, we're Pepsi Co. We get it. We make a ton of beverages. Guess what? This is a small one. This is why we did it, and this is the ingredients, and this is the process that we go through. I think being outright, forthright about it is really critical. Oh, by the way, up in Seattle, Theo, I just had to mention that, it's one of my absolute favorite brands. And this is actually my favorite bar, the almond coconut, and I think sold out all the time. That's another piece I think that we think about that's a nice cue when it comes to craft, is that, LTO, limited time limit. You've only got so much of it before we roll over. Right? The last one I want to talk about, and this one's, I don't know, interesting to me. I just want to bring it up and kind of see where the room goes with it. It's this micro-focused dining. My favorite exit or example out of all of these is Potatotopia. Never in my life. Have you been in the one in, there's one in New York, a couple in Jersey. So one in Jersey is one of them in Jersey. It's, all these are malls, by the way. Okay. It is a potato bar. Yeah. I mean, it's literally like you walk in, it's like, hey, do you want Idaho? Do you want mashed? Do you want your toppings? Do you want to build your layer? If you don't want a potato, walk out the door, because it's a potato bar. This is what we sell. All right? Same thing with Just Salads. I mean, I think Longhorn Steakhouse is maybe my favorite, and I want to say this is the reason I have them on an example, is if you call Longhorn Steakhouse and you ask them about their happy hour special, and they connect you to the bar, 9 times out of 10, that bartender's going to tell you that drink pairs well with what? Steak. Right? And when you walk in the door and there's somebody standing there, they're saying, hey, thanks for coming to Longhorn, you've heard about our steaks. Right? So from the front of the house to the back of the house, they've got one message. Right? We sell steak. That's what we do. Now, Potatotopia, they don't give a damn who you talk to, this is all I got potatoes. But whenever you've got a lot of things on the menu, you come walking in, when that conversation is focused and it allows the consumer to hinge and really center in on that's your thing, well, now I know what I'm going to get, right? That helps out tremendously when they leave. Because then they're walking out and they're telling their friends, what'd you do? Let me see, what did I do? Well, I had a steak. Where at? Well, Longhorn, because that's what they sell. That's what I had, right? And when you sell steaks and ribs and burgers, well, what do you mean to your consumer? Well, it kind of depends. Because, John's been coming in and getting a burger for the last, 2 or 3 years, and somebody else comes in and get ribs, and somebody else comes in and gets steak. Well, what do you mean? Well, you can get anything here. Then you don't stand for anything. That's the opportunity with micro-focus. This is what we got. This is what we sell. We do it extremely well. All right, so let's talk about these 3 areas now, all right? Which, by the way, just admire my graphic for a second because I work in the environment. Mindful consumerism versus mindless consumerism. Now, I'm not going to read these 2 giant definitions to you, of which you can agree or disagree with me on this. But it's the tension that I think, by the way, inside, and that gives us a chance to see empathy. And so this tension that we're seeing in the consumer marketplace today, and let's start with mindless consumerism. And I think that, honestly, the best way to summarize this is a quote that says, too many people spend money they haven't earned to buy things they don't want to impress people they don't like. Right? That is the kind of way to think about, that's not my quote, by the way, but that's the cue that we're thinking about. When it comes to mindful consumerism, there's a lot to unpack in this. I think the most important thing for us to consider is the idea, and I'm going to read this part to you. This is, okay, so the roots have gained momentum. People continue to look for ways to make a positive contribution to themselves and the planet by purchasing items that are good for them. Right? That is what I think our conversation is about for the rest of this little time here. It's a positive contribution, right, to themselves and the planet in purchasing things that are good for them, right? When I say good for them, that's not holistically, physically based, right? So there's some emotional cues and opportunities inside mindful consumerism that we have. It's going back to those 3 P's of innovation. Maybe there's a product story, maybe it's a message around positioning, or we're trying to reach a whole new target, right? A positive contribution is really interesting, and I have the unique luxury, I think, in my job of talking to consumers and involving them in co-creation every week, basically. I get people and bring people in. And it's interesting when you start thinking about this mindful consumerism and the growth of that, is that it has its roots in the fact that people, they want to do something good. They like the idea of a purchase they make having not just positive impact on them, but it being good for somebody else. And when we talk to, say, for example, Aramark, or we talk to, Chartwell's does higher education, right? And when we talk to the students at those campuses, and we ask them, what's a meaningful moment for you inside the food, at the cafeteria, a lot of those are, come on, right? Oh, but you know what? There's this lady named Jackie, and Jackie's been working there for 10 years. And I know for a fact that they treat her well, and that makes me feel good about my money going toward meal planning. Yeah, they got a salad bar, yeah, they got this, yeah, they got that. But the people aspect to that generation that's below millennials or zennials is meaningful. That is a positive contribution that we're talking about. All right, now there's 3 aspects that I want to talk about when it comes to the mindful consumer. And the first one, and we're going to talk about this first in some in-depth, is embracing practicality, right? So we're going to get into that because that's a huge, huge notion that we're thinking about, right? This mindful consumer is not just someone who's willing to forego everything and go, man, I'm all in with, the barefoot raw water craze. Yes, I don't care how much it costs, right? That's a real thing, by the way. Sustainability, second aspect I want to talk about in this, and then the third thing is value across the menu, right? That's that duality that we have, an opportunity, I think, to maybe change some conversations internally, right? So first things first, I want to talk a little bit about Jack Ma. I mean, you guys know what Alibaba is, obviously. And he had a really interesting quote when it came to consumer, and by the way, just stand back from China for a minute, and I talk about China a little bit. My younger brother is the attaché to the ambassador there in agriculture, and so we're watching the rise of that middle class, right? I mean, it's a dynamic shift in the marketplace in China, right? And so, by the way, anybody from a global brand positioning looking to expand and do a little more upscale work, China, 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 right? That's the opportunity. And for the first time, right, China's now importing beef from the United States as well, which tells you a little bit about the value that they are willing, that consumer wants to spend on things. This is Jack Ma's quote about this mindful consumer, and I think it's meaningful, so let me just read it to you. Today's customers want to be healthy and happy no matter who they are. Owning the most expensive or the latest good and feeling good, and consumers are showing an increasing preference for participating in activities and indulging in experiences that promote their well-being and sharing those experiences with their friends. You know being happy is a critical driver, right? When Jack Ma says it, and one of the most popular rap artists has a song all about being happy right now as well. It's a lyric in his song. It's the only thing that matters is happiness. He's a hardcore rapper. To me, when I see that kind of dichotomy coming at it, you know, like the richest guy in the world talking about who he's selling to, and people want to be happy, you know, and a guy from the East Coast rapper talking about being happy, to me it says mindful consumerism and that positive contribution has a huge emotional cueing. And it's, this is an experience. I feel good about this, right? I don't have a label on my sleeve, that's okay. I feel like I've paid for something that's going to be meaningful long term for me. So a little bit more about this, and let's talk about millennials. We all really need to concentrate on millennials. It's not a mistake when we start thinking about the size of the generation. I really feel like, and this is going to offend some of you, and that's okay, I feel like boomers and millennials have more in common than they want to admit.
Oh yeah,
Right?
That's what I was.
And it's a barbell approach. It's a barbell approach, right? As we see a generation, and this is sort of interesting there at the end, is according to Forrester, like 69% of all fitness worn are by millennials. Like fitness beta, what do they call those? Fitbits, you know, and all the other ones. Those are driven by a generation that really wants to track, monitor their health. What's the same thing happening at a slightly elevated age? Boomers. Very interested in health, very interested in what's happening with their bodies, and trying to maintain a level that is going to let them have a happy experience and a meaningful contribution for a longer period of time. I think it's interesting, by the way, this is how we define millennials, is born between 1980 and 1995, right? And that is a massive, massive population, right? The interesting thing about boomers is that boomers are basically North America and Australia, right? That's where the baby boom, because it turns out if you baby boom after the war, the Germans didn't really feel like celebrating in a huge way. Everybody else was like, let's get on board here and start, you know, ramping up the numbers, right? Hey, you know, I'm not saying all these things are, you know, facts from a statistician, they're just a feeling. When it comes to millennials, that's a global generation. That is a worldwide phenomenon. The numbers are absolutely huge. And so when we start thinking about this mindful consumer, we don't discount the boomer, we don't discount the X. But I think if you had that target you could find the most empathy with, the one that has that sweet spot, and you really want to understand their day-to-day life and their tensions, the millennial will be the target I would concentrate on, right? Even if it's not our primary driver. Having them in mind helps gives us those cues that we can move something onto the menu and down the pipeline. All right, let's talk about embracing practicality. This is our first one. I think the thing about healthy is another cue I want to put in on this. This is simple and real food, right? And it's just as important as clean and convenient. I mean, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, we were having a whole conversation about natural versus organic versus, you know, X, Y, and Z, and there was a lot of confusion, right? A decade later, what we're seeing is that, and this is what Whole Foods calls transparency 2.0, more or less. It's simplified, right? Don't make them figure everything out. Make it clean, make it simple, make it real. That gives us that practical approach to mindfulness. Now, here's the definition. This consumer is embracing a healthier lifestyle. We already talked about that. We're going to talk about it a little bit more, right? They're looking for everyday options to be cleaner, simpler, and contribute to an overall healthier experience for them. So first and foremost, right, there's a little bit of confusion still in this. I think this is kind of interesting. This is the International Food Information Council, and they said that consumers are exposed to food information from more sources than ever before, right? but nutritional literacy is lacking. And I'm sure you guys have a million stories of sitting down with someone talking about your menu and them asking a question. Is it, look, I'd really, a gluten-free pizza, right? I'd love a gluten-free pizza. Well, I'd love to be David Copperfield, but I'm not so sure I can make that happen. This is what's in a pizza. Here's a different option for you, right? So this is sort of interesting. I thought that they said the more information that we receive, well, this is it. It said almost 60% said that high and healthy components or nutrients, while just over half said it was free from artificial ingredients, preservatives, or additives. Defining a healthy food, right? 60% said it was high and healthy components or nutrients. And half said it was free from artificial ingredients, preservatives, or additives. So when you ask somebody what's healthy, it's hard for them to put a finite definition to that. And I think it's what led a lot of our clients to say that the consumer is defining their own level of healthy. And I think when it comes back to that practicality, that comes down to real, clean, and whole. Those are the pieces that seem to make a difference. But it's this battle between what we call the free-froms versus the healthy format. That's why I think this embracing practicality, in some cases, has a nuance to it. And we have a couple of examples here. It's like an immune booster. That's an additional healthy cue. But when it comes to the free-from, there's still those people who are looking for low-fat or sourced locally or not over international waters. I mean, the free-froms. So, according to Euromonitor International, the global market for health and wellness products has reached $686 billion, right? And we're going to see this continue to boom. So one of those things that when we start looking at trends and what's having an impact and will have a lasting impact is we're looking at CPG, consumer packaged goods, menu mentions, what's happening across that, and then we're looking at those emerging forms. What are those pieces and parts? One of the things that we see happening with embracing practicality is all through, right? The shelf is being impacted. We're seeing menu mentions and adjustments on forms, taking on those healthy elements. So this is something that I think if there's no other piece you get behind on new product development, embracing practicality would be the one that you could center in on and have a lot of potential success for hitting a wider audience than that. So how are consumers defining healthy? A little bit of this is, I think, kind of interesting. In some cases, and this is for everybody, when you look at the lower right-hand side, this is from an FSH annual food survey. The majority, 59% of respondents define a healthy eating style as the right mix of different food groups. Hey, there's some debate on this GMO conversation. I think some consumers rightfully on the other side go, I'm not sure I ever really understood it anyway, what was happening. So I think that same conversation we had 10 years ago about natural and organic is happening now with GMO. I can't put a guardrail in my head around it to say this is what's good and this is what's bad. And I will tell you this too, just being in the Pacific Northwest not too long ago, talking about a locally sourced product, and we ask consumers, how far of a range is a locally sourced product? And they go, I don't know, in a couple states. That's not the definition of local anywhere, is it? It does not have the same context all the time, right? So I think some of those loosening definitions or that lack of understanding is leading to a less of a concern. But here's some of these products that I really like when I start thinking about some of these opportunities. And two of them that I want to bring up. And my favorite one I want to talk about is Just Eat. Right? You guys know Just Eat. It started in the UK. It's in Australia. It's a food delivery system. I mean, I think they just sold like their 1 billionth meal or something like this. A third of the meals are meat-free that they have now, right? And so we've seen this start, literally 7-8 years ago with people trying to say reduce, like Meatless Monday was one that we saw across the board. And we saw a younger consumer embracing not a meat-free lifestyle, but meat maintenance is what we like to call it. Is this idea of, when I want a steak, man, I want a steak, but I feel heavy afterwards sometimes. Or sometimes when I eat chicken, I feel like, maybe there's a different option I could have had. And so they start mixing in some of those different kinds of options, right? I don't think it's 100% vegan, right? I honestly believe this is a lifestyle choice that people are saying, do I think protein is important? Yeah. Do I enjoy meat? Absolutely. Do I need it every meal? Probably not. You know, would it be a part of a healthier lifestyle if I mixed in other things? Yes. So here's a strategy I'm going to throw at you that a client of ours took that I holistically believe in, and it's not been quantitatively tested, is that do both.
Yes.
Where you have a meat option, I would recommend go more meat. I'm telling you, you got a burger, and there's a chance to be 50% lean, 100% all in, more ribs, bigger steak, do it. And then lose the chicken parmesan that doesn't sell. Get rid of 3 or 4 other meat and bring in some veggie options. Because when people come in and they want meat, they want meat, right? Giving them those other options gives them license to say, you know what, okay, I'll try something else. So this is not an anti-meat conversation. This is a plant-based increase, right?
But
I
if
think
you
that's
want
what
to
I'm saying.
increase plant-based too, what we've done is we've actually implemented a 50-50 blended burger, which is
Ooh,
the
mushrooms?
mushroom.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. 50-50
So
blend.
we've done lentils as well, which works really well.
So we talk about the addition. This is one just to kind of throw out there. I'm not saying this is potentially a trend, but as we're talking about healthy ingredients, but then the addition of some things. I'm noticing a lot of cues. Right, this is the immune builder from Smoothie. It's got a herbal immune enhancer. I mean, that's one of those pieces, and we all know this, is when it comes to smoothies, when it comes to drinking, you know, some nutrition, you'll take a few more chances than when it comes to, you know, your eggs in the morning. And say, hey, this has got a little sprinkle of herbal immune enhancer on top of it. I'm gonna pass on that. Hey, you know, it's just got a little kale in your smoothie mix. Okay, pipes up, I'll be all in for that. Just a couple other pieces on this. This is, I actually made this at home, the healthy almond coated chicken strips. And I forget, Chef was talking about, was it corn dog? The almond coated corn dog. Until you said it, I wouldn't have thought about it. But I served this to the kids, and no one knew what was going on. And when I said, hey, this is almond coated, they were literally nonplussed by the entire event. And I was kind of excited about it. But it was a really delightful way to shift on breading. And I thought it had a really healthy cue, and at least, you know, in that one little, you know, focus group of one, made me feel like it was something that gave a lot of license to try it on other executions. So, quick, convenient, indulgent. 2018, and this is goes without saying, I think it's the year of snacks, right? I mean, every client that I talk to, every shelf set that we consider is we're looking for snack options, snack sizes, on the go. Snacking is a huge cue. It's really interesting too, is that one of the clients we work with is a massive destination restaurant, and they've got one of those big menus as well. One of the things that they were getting dinged on, getting knocked on, not having any snack options. We're like, God, it'd take you an hour to wait in line to sit down. And then the consumer goes, what are the snack sizes? And I'm like, okay, let's start figuring out a way to bring some of these executions to life. You know? And that's not just for the quick, convenient aspect. That's got a health cue to it. People feel like if there's a chance to have smaller snack sizes, it makes a difference in their overall health. I think this is kind of interesting too, is that according to IRI, is that 42% of consumers get snacks from restaurants, and that's up. And it continues to be rising up since 2015, 2016. People continue to go, that's an opportunity for me to get snacks. I know we have some really interesting C-store options and vending options when we start looking around, but it's really, I think, telling when people think restaurant opportunities, right, also include snack sizes and snack options for those. The learning that I would have from this is that it's not a one-to-one translation from a winning dish, you know, a whole plated dish, make it a little bit smaller and call it a snack size. It doesn't work. I mean, there's still some playing and understanding on the food form and the experience of eating those things. I will say is that, you know, handheld foods, you know, 2 bites, you know, 3 bites, and that's snack size. We start getting outside of that, and people are like, no, it's not a snack anymore. You know, it's just a small sandwich now, right? So there's playing with those forms and those delivery styles, I think make a huge opportunity or experiential difference between a snack and what someone would call just a small meal, right? It's a thin line, right? And I think we can always go with the standard, you know what I mean? Okay, here's an empanada, make it a little bit smaller. Yep, that's definitively a snack when I sell 2 of them together. I think this is sort of an interesting one. Oh, I love this. This is the barbecue turkey sliders. That actually has an almond coleslaw. That was going to be my final meal. Was I actually made the almond coleslaw on a hot chicken with a Hawaiian barbecue wrap, like biscuit. Not a biscuit, it's like a bun. Yeah. Oh, I mean Frank's Red Hot on some fried chicken with the almonds, Asian slaw, coleslaw. It kills. I didn't want to sign up for execution per se, but I thought it was pretty damn good. This is one that I just think kind of is an interesting play on, and it's the only one I have in here that's indulgent, that also has a healthy cue, but I think it's something for consideration. Is, inside, one of the clients we work with is McKee Foods. McKee out of Chattanooga, they make Little Debbie's, Swiss rolls, and all those pieces, right? They're not selling less of those, FYI, in case you're curious. But one of the things that they've thought about, was this mix between indulgent and the right, or the license to eat it, right? Now, in some cases, and I think this cherry almond board is a good example, and they said the war between want to eat and should eat is finally over. That is a sweet tooth filler that has a ton of healthy, options inside of it. I think when we start thinking about this quick, this convenient, this on the go, I tend to go, if my mistake, on, this is non-meat, it's healthy, it's got those healthy cues, it's got a healthy herbal immune booster, and in some cases, it could be, hey, this is Halo Top, right? I mean, there is you can't, that stuff's sold out all over Canada. Like still, you guys know Halo Top's got the protein and the ice cream, is that people are like, oh, this is my little indulgence, but it's not bad. It's, by the way, fits right perfectly in with this. It's a convenient, practical, mindful consideration. All right, so finally, this is sort of some walking away things. Remember this, real natural foods without complicated health benefits. There's a sure way to get the credit on the menu for healthier items. Day part specific, and we didn't talk about that, but that's another element that I think is really ripe for a change and an opportunity, is how do we think about breakfast, lunch, and dinner in different day part and different healthier options, right? I mean, for me, I know that Carl's Jr. and Hardee's is another client and they built their business on some pretty fatty breakfast items, right? They don't get a lot of drive-through activities. People saying, yeah, I think I'll have those, overnight oats that you have, right? Considering where some options are for them to change that day part consideration, has to consider a shift at breakfast. So I think that's one of those areas that we can consider, possibly some of us could. So I think when we start talking about like how to make this mindful consumer moment work for us, we do have to be very careful in consideration of the total cost to the operation as well. That's why I think snack size can be a real opportunity for us to make a difference, right? Clean, simple, and this is one that I think we haven't talked about at all, but toppings, sauces, dips. I mean, that is a real way to build up that practical mindfulness. Is that, I've got arugula that's made with onions, and it's a little bit healthier, right? Or I've got, a sauce or a dip. I think we don't utilize those enough to really give us some healthy cues. It can give, somebody a different consideration. It's almost like having the Halo Top. I get my ice cream, but it's still good for me. It's got one of those healthy elements built into it. Okay, real quickly, not real quickly, sustainability. This is, I think, it seems like, I think about 11 years ago, Campbell's Soup, hired a chief sustainability officer, and I remember having conversations with them at that brand about what sustainability meant at that time. And the correlation I'll use right now is that at that time, sustainability was really for corporate reports at that time. I mean, we had a conversation, and it was like, we are going to use X amount of less water than we used a year ago, and it's going to go into this CSR report, and that'll go out to our stockholders, and that's what sustainability means, right? And because if you told somebody, hey, well, you can take a snapshot of our QR code on the back of this bottle, and it'll tell you about all our sustainability efforts. I mean, your consumer goes, what's a QR code? I don't give a crap about your sustainable efforts, right? Today, we're seeing IT infrastructure saying, we are transparent with all of our transactions. We're putting everything on blockchain. We know where all of our content is coming from, and we can give the consumer an exact detail of where that chicken was grown and raised, and the consumer goes, I don't care. Right? Now, sustainability matters at the consumer level. So 10 years later, this is something that they absolutely believe is important, and they want to know about it. Question I still have, and I think we all have, is how much more are they willing to pay for it? I think that's a fair assessment for all of us, and something I think we have to be very careful in how we navigate when it comes to bringing in other ingredients or partnering with other companies that can help us tell a more sustainable story. So according to Innova Market Insights, which gives a lot of trend information, the top trend for 2018 is going full circle. It highlights the notion of greater consumer expectations we were just talking about. The companies and brands will be more resource smart in their development, such as tip to tail, innovative uses for food waste, and more biodegradable and renewable packaging, right? Which I'm sure are conversations that are happening in all of our operations, right? Ooh, cool transition. Why is that happening? I think because 8 to 10 years has passed, and we've seen the noise that started off as sustainability become much more focused, and now instead of having 5 different coffee beans that have all been sustainably brought together, consolidation has occurred in a lot of cases, and we've seen, this is what Pete says about it, and this is how we're translating that over into a meaningful story for our consumer. I think we talked about all this information that people have had access to. I think this is real when it comes to sustainability. I think enough brands have made headway, not just from the restaurant point of view, but certainly from the packaging point of view at all, to say these are significant efforts. This is what we're doing to try to make a difference here. And consumers are being savvy. And in a lot of cases, this mindful consumer is checking that. They're looking for that kind of information. And I bring this up, is that one of those things that I think that comes together or can play really well with sustainability, and one of the believable aspects to it is if something's available year-round, we're talking about produce, I mean, how sustainable is that? And so to tell a story where, say, this is a seasonal item because it's available right now, and where we get it from has a much more sustainable story, is inherently believable, as opposed to raw water. And then Deloitte Food Equation says it's clear that the evolving value, and I think it's really interesting, if I was going to say, spend some time looking at this consumer, and you want to get a study that has a lot about changing values, the Deloitte Food Value Equation has a lot of depth and richness in case you want to pass something on to your team. It's a decent study to take a look at. But it says that the evolving value drivers as a group have become meaningful for a sizable number of consumers, and transparency is an overarching driver in that. And so that's one of those things that I think we've tried over the last several years to tell a more transparent story. I think what we've done, not that we weren't transparent 10 years ago, and in a lot of cases, what most of us in the restaurant business have had a chance to do is allow our partners to tell that transparent story for us, and I say for us. We do business with National Bison Association, or we're with this food group, and they have a story. They've done a better job of marketing that, and frankly, it's more believable. When we try to tell the consumer that McDonald's is transparent, sustainable, they inherently don't believe it. When we say McDonald's buys from this vendor, and they have a transparent and sustainable story, then it becomes much more believable for us. One of my favorite clients to talk about right now is Orca. You guys know Orca? Somebody said yeah? No. Yeah. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Sorry. Orca is a back-of-the-house food digestive system. So literally, they sell these things in multiple sizes. They've started selling them primarily in hotels, right? Big banquet halls where people have a lot of food waste. What their food waste system does is actually digests the food and returns it as clean water into the municipal drinking water system to be reprocessed. And so, as opposed to throwing away all of this food waste, now big hotels, and they have one that's for smaller operations as well, people are putting their food waste into this machine that is turning it into water and returning it back into the system. To me, it's an interesting story simply because clients are absolutely loving it, that it's giving them this opportunity to have a very powerful food waste story, which we all know in the past has been one of those things that we've dealt with, worked around, tried to figure out how to reduce those kinds of things. Is when you can have a conversation and say, this is what's happening with our food waste. We're at a point now where the consumer says, and that's a conversation I want to have. That's interesting for me to hear about as a story that you're telling. I think, the National Bison Association is one that I like to point out, simply because I think, bison is a pretty versatile meat, but the interesting thing about them is that they're seeing an increase in sales from grocery to restaurant, and they are pretty adamant about the healthy aspects of that and also the sustainability that the story can tell. And at the same time, I think about almonds. There's not another ingredient that has that ability to talk about usage, from the hull to the seed to the way it's processed. There's a really sustainable story that comes in with this. The theme that I want you to walk away from with this is that when it is in consideration of whether it's food waste or materials in our restaurants or partners we do business with, having people give us a chance to tell that sustainable story empowers our story for a mindful consumer. And once again, I think leading with this on our menu is probably not the strategy for us. Having it available via social, and through our partners' websites gives us that credibility that we're not trying to toot our own horn too hard. Go check out our partner who's helping us. Then I kind of want to look ahead. And by the way, I couldn't believe who mentioned the Portlandia episode. Yeah. So if you guys seen that Portlandia episode where the guy says, is the chicken local? Was he happy? Did he have any friends? And then they go out to the, you gotta
Mind if I leave and go see?
Yeah, do you mind if I go see? I should do a little farm. Save our spot, we'll be back. I think when we start looking across the board here, we're seeing this idea of transparency from not just the ingredients, but also practices. And I think another thing to consider beyond our partners is how do we process what has been traditionally a food waste. One of the products that I thought was really interesting is a carrot top almond pesto. That's an interesting thing, whereas we took, it was traditionally just a food waste and turned it into, once again, a topper, is that, pesto, and gave you a real, by the way, who cares if you can tell that story? That's a cost savings notion in and of itself. If you could tell the story and it gave the consumer, something to hinge on, then the power is even further. And I think this is really interesting too, Deloitte. This is transparency requires product attributes such as clear labeling, certification by trusted third parties, and company attributes. One of the really interesting pieces is when the client calls us and says, hey, we are looking to increase our sustainable or our transparent offerings. The first thing we ask is, first of all, does your customer care? If your customer cares, then do you have a reason to believe that what you're doing is actually sustainable and transparent? And if you don't, then that's not a story you should tell, right? You got to start, you got to move down the path, but I think this entire conversation around sustainability, i.e. and transparency built into that, takes a special consideration. Is it, do we have that leverage to push that kind of brand message? That's going to be believable from the consumer. And if the answer is yes, well then press the gas. And if the answer is no, then it's leverage partnerships. That's the approach that I think, from a brand and a reality point of view, that we would put out there. If the RNC calls us and says, we have a transparency and trust issue, we don't need to ask those questions. We know you've got to start doing some things differently. How are you going to do it? Third-party accreditation. We're going to start putting information in a way that people can see for themselves, and we're going to do the right thing before we even say anything else about it. And then I think just looking ahead to those new aspects of sustainability, one of my favorite aspects right now that I think is going to be a bigger message in the future is long-term relationships. It's one of those cues that I don't think enough companies are spending time talking about right now, but it's long-term, not just partnerships with providers, i.e., we get beans from this farm and we've gotten them for 4 generations, and we've had this level of employees and they've been here for 40 years. Those are really great moments that consumers are increasingly more interested in hearing. And so I think that's going to be on the next cusp of us telling some of those longer-term, transparent, and sustainably enriching stories. The mission is another one. It's so funny to me as we do a lot of work with startups, and there's not one startup that we're doing work with that doesn't have a mission-based value system. You know, it's really interesting to me, and I think it's very something to consider for a large organization, is that people who are coming into the workforce want to work for a company that has a mission. Right? They want to work for somebody that has a sense of we are feeding the world, or we are taking care of our partners and our principals by feeding people 1 meal and not making these things up. That is one of those next levels of sustainability that I think is going to really make a difference with that mindful consumer. I know a lot of you guys already do that, but it's one of those pieces that I think we'll continue to see some interest in. So, leverage partnerships and consider food waste, energy savings, and then multiple uses for ingredients as those key sustainable drivers. I'm sure, I don't know about you guys, but my biggest beef, and this was, I worked in the test kitchen, and we threw away coffee grounds just, all the time. And one of our chefs came in one day and said, this is a tremendous amount of waste. Can we do something other than, turn this into potted, seed pods, and do all that other stuff? And so she made what she called cowboy bacon, which is literally, bacon encrusted with coffee grounds, and it fried up, and it's the most delicious version of bacon, other than maybe a candied and deep dipped chocolate thing. It was an amazing dish, and it was really crazy. This is just processed coffee grounds, baked into, kind of hard to beat, right? It's one of my favorite little things. All right, so now let's talk about value across the menu. This, consumers are mindful of prices, but they're not always aware of your costs. They really don't have a really good idea, right? Finding the right menu items that drive better experiences, not higher check averages, makes the value worth it. One of our clients is a company called Lion's Choice. Lion's Choice sells roast beef, right? Sandwiches. That's their go-to. That's what they've stood on for 50 years. You get a cheaper, medium rare roast beef from Lion's Choice than you can buy in any grocery store, right? And they get zero credit for it, right? Consumers just don't even know, because it's got a drive-through. They can't even imagine that it's like, we don't know, Boar's Head's better than this stuff. It doesn't come close. This stuff's great, but they can't tell that story. So they have to find different ways to change the value equation, because the truth is the consumer doesn't care if it costs you more, right? And you gave me a convenient solution. So I want you to consider this equation, right? And the equation is price plus taste and quantity, right? I think taste and quantity, when it comes to value, is a direct correlation, right? And think about it this way. When you go to Olive Garden, they don't always win on taste. I've seen the numbers, right? But where they win is quantity, right? They bring you a dish, your head screams value, because it's got, let's face it, you've already been all you can eat bread and salad, and now they've got this thing that's as big as 50-yard line seal, the Super Bowl, and they're like, oh, value, but they don't always win. So the quality taste issue is one that we balance out. Over service and experience equals value. So people have this equation in their head, right? And it's surprising to me how savvy I'll choose millennial mothers are. For example, when we have a conversation with them about where the best deal is, they will say, which night, right? Because I know Taco Tuesday's here. I know Monday, here. I know Wednesday, here. They get it, right? But when it comes to the overall equation, that's something I think we can really consider. It's price, what's this cost? Taste and quality. Taste is always going to win, but there's a thing. Over service and experience equals the value equation that we can play with. I've got a couple of things to consider here at the very end. By the way, this is how the industry defines value traditionally, right? Yes, we got, boneless Thursdays, with, you guys been, does anybody even go to Buffalo Wild Wings? I do too. So I have 2 teenage boys, and so Why? Of course I'm going to go there. They're killing me with this deal. I mean, I go there on Thursdays, and I'm like, yeah, man, I should really, rake it up. I shouldn't be a high bill. I always do the math afterwards, and I'll spend more money. Every time. And I'm like, I work in this industry. How do I not know? To avoid this. Day parts is another switch, right? Is have a day, like, hey, let's go early, right? If you come in at this time, your happy hour at this moment, you get this, margaritas, happy hours, all those things, right? This is the equation or the pyramid that I'd like to consider. The table stakes, quality, speed, and service. When we're talking about value, I think having quality, great tasting food, the speed that comes out at a reasonable time, and service that is at least not off-putting, table stakes. What moves up the value equation? How do we differentiate ourselves? Choices, a switch on experience, and abundance. I mean, to be honest, if you load people up with food, they feel like, oh, well, there's more. That certainly was a better value, even if I didn't eat it. Choices, I think, is kind of an interesting little spin on this, because when we think about choices, I don't think it's like something for everyone, but I think it is a slight twist on that. How do you take what has been a traditional item and give it another opportunity or another moment to have a different experience or expectation? And then on the whole, price, variations on the norm, and craveability. When I think about on the whole, and I say price, that's a tough conversation per concept. Whenever we go in and look at an evaluation on a restaurant concept, we start asking ourselves, can we differentiate on price? The first and the most uncomfortable question we're going to ask is, what's our most popular item, and how much can we drop that cost by? Right? And immediately, everybody starts sweating, and they start thinking about how they're going to transfer that information over to, management, our vendor, not our vendors, but our franchisees. What's that piece? If you want to be differentiated, and this savvy consumer knows that your burger is an $8.99 value, and they go to Chevy's, or they go to Chili's, or they can go to TGI Fridays and get the same basic burger for $7, I hate to tell you, lowering it to $6.59 will not make it an ownable experience. It's got to be significantly lower, right? That's how you differentiate or own yourself on price. The other piece that I want to point out, and this is one that I think that it is one of my hottest pieces when it comes to product innovation, is craveability. Is one of the things that we talk about all the time is where it hits you in your culinary experience, right? And so we leave the five senses in every single conversation. And the one thing I think we don't differentiate enough necessarily on is where is it in your mouth, in the total mouth feel, right? Crunch, crisp, are two different effects, and they have different impact, right? And there's a cool and a sweet and a heat, and that combination, obviously an umami. Those pieces, texture, the craveability, especially on things that don't traditionally have that element or that cue, can drive an expectation to be a better experience.
Well, it has to be a wow factor.
It has to be. I think that's a great point. When you think about this, subtle probably doesn't work in that regard. Falls a little flat. All right, a couple little pieces here. Justin, I want to talk about craveability, value for you. One of those other things that I think is really important is that value to them is a lower price, but what increases your opportunity to pass that on is, do we have one or two ingredients that can transfer across a ton of different dishes? I think finding those right ingredients, like an almond, can do that for us really, really well. All right, summary. Cheap doesn't always equate value. They think about the bottom line, but not our bottom line, and they look for a way to leverage ingredients that make dishes craveable without driving costs higher. I think one of those things when it comes to value, and this is something that we've uncovered over the last few years, it's probably not a giant secret, but forcing consumers to jump through hoops, find their deals, go for double down on a rebate, it really pisses them off. If I show up and you tell me I'm going to get 60% off, but I've got to, bring 3 friends and, split a meal, elements like that, it's just confusing. You're making me upset here. I just want a deal, and that's it. So finding ways to bundle, put things together, certainly can drive, give us a season. We just have to be careful not to make people go through too many hoops, because then it's frustration and it kills the experience. All right, so finally, And I'm not going to read all this, but I think knowing that embracing that practicality, finding those things that are convenient, that are real, that are clean, looking for that day part opportunity and snack size, that's part of that practicality that mindful consumer is really interested in. Sustainability is much more transparent now, and the consumer knows it, and they're not necessarily checking up on us, but they expect they'd have that information at hand. Make sure you leverage your partners to find it. And value across the menu. Look for those opportunities to take ingredients and spread them across, and that value equation. Remember that it's not the same for every concept, but for this mindful consumer, that experience is a driver for that value. And so if they're there and they feel like they're making a positive contribution, not just to their own health, but to the planet and the well-being of others, that can lift that experiential moment and give them a greater value. That's it. I know it's a lot. So